Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about unmoderated caucuses. When you get your schedule for the model, you notice that you are not in committee the entire time. And when you're not in committee, you'll be in one of the smaller rooms in the hotel doing unmoderated caucuses. These unmoderated caucuses are actually very important because they're used to get a number of things done that you simply won't have time for during committee sessions because we're trying to get through all of the PDRs in the committees. So, that being said, make sure you prepare beforehand by reading over PDRs and making notes on who you want to sign and who you want to sign yours. This will come in vastly handy for your first unmoderated caucus of the model. The first day, you're going to be focused on getting co-signatories for your PDR during the unmoderated caucus. So, go into the unmoderated caucus with a short summary on hand that you and your partner are going to present to other delegates. Talking points for this should include what the problem at hand is and why your resolution will help solve this problem. It could look something like this.
Hi, I wanted to talk to you about your PDR. I read it in the packet and it seemed really interesting. Could you explain it a little more, please?
Yeah, sure. So our PDR is, we're focusing on theme of development in the region. So we picked the groups, victims of insurgency groups and political oppression because they're a group that often is forgotten about and they can help contribute to development and they're a huge resource for human capital. So we're focusing on strengthening education programs and job training programs to really help them reintegrate back into society. And we feel like this is not only a national problem, but a regional problem. And if we all work together to help this one specific group, then it would really benefit our region. So what we're doing is creating an online platform where all these victims can connect with each other and share resources and share their stories. And that way they feel support with one another, but also support of the international community as well. So we wanted to base it in the online platform, but also help the job training programs and education programs already existing within each country.
That sounds really great.
Because she talked very specifically about the problem at hand and what specifically her PDR was going to help achieve. And it does, as you notice, it doesn't have to be your full proponent speech that you're going to be giving at the model in the committee sessions, meaning you don't have to tell them all of your resolves. Instead, just a brief outline is helpful for them, and if they have any questions, they're going to feel free to open it back up to you. So, that being said, the next tip that I have is after you both have done your pitch for what your PDR is, and before you ask if they want to be co-signatories, ask them if they have any questions for you, and also ask any questions of them that you might have on their PDR.
Hi, I just had a quick question about your PDR. How are you planning on funding this part right here?
We were planning on gaining support from regional NGOs and any voluntary donors, so none of the funds would be taken from OAS itself.
Splendid.
So have you decided on any ways to measure the success of your resolution once it has been implemented?
Yes, we plan on having each OAS representative from their respective country work with the government to create a report outlining successes and needs for the government. The report would be brought back to the OAS and presented at the annual General Assembly.
Great, you've answered all my questions. Do you have any others for myself?
No, I don't think so. You've got a really good resolution here. Would you be interested in being co-signatories?
Sure. I would love to support your PDR if you'll support ours as well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Once you've answered each other's questions, this is the time to ask each other if you want to be co-signatories on a PDR. If you want to sign theirs and vice versa, then great, you have one less signature to get. But if you decide that you don't want to sign their PDR, then politely refusing them and walking away can be awkward. Here is one way to politely refuse to sign their PDR at this time. But be aware, there's a good chance that they could come back and ask you again for a signature.
Excuse me?
Hi.
Hi. I was wondering if you had a chance to read our PDR and if you'd like to be co-signatories.
Oh, I think you have a really interesting resolution, but I want to talk to my partner about it first.
Okay, sure, no problem. Once you get back to your partner, then I'll find you a little bit later.
Great.
Okay, thanks. Nice to meet you.
You too. That was interesting. Thank you.
I saw for that.
What?
Excuse me?
Oh.
Hey, I was wondering if you had time to talk to your partner and was wondering if you could, again, if you want to be co-signatories.
You know what, at this time, I don't think we're going to be co-signatories. We want to wait to see how other delegates vote and how it kind of works out, but Thanks, a really interesting point.
Okay,
Well
thanks,
thought of.
it's no problem, I really hope that I can have your support either way when it comes time to
Sure.
vote.
Well, good luck with
Thank
everything.
you so much,
No
really
problem.
appreciate it.
Last part of the unmoderated caucus is the amendment portion. Amendments are a tricky but crucial part of the success of MOAS, but you will find that there is very little time during the question and answer period or the speakers list period to come up with and draft amendments during the formal committee sessions. Deciding if you want to amend a resolution should therefore be done prior to entering the committee session. And while you can do this with your partner, you're going to have more success if you already have the support of other countries to back your amendment. You're going to find that oftentimes other countries have similar ideas on how to amend a resolution, and your chair will get frustrated if multiple amendments are proposed that essentially say the same thing. To avoid this, when you're in an unmoderated caucus, pull aside countries that you would like to have support your amendment, and talk with them on how to create a draft that incorporates your ideas as well as theirs. Additionally, if you see other groups forming amendments, feel free to approach them and find out what they're proposing. This way, you can get a good debate of ideas and find out also if their amendment is similar in content to yours. If they are, once again, feel free to try and combine the two amendments. If not, then multiple amendments will simply be proposed. This will save a lot of time and frustration during the committee sessions, as well as increase the chances that your amendment is going to be passed. Ultimately, a great deal of your time is actually going to be spent doing these unmoderated caucuses, so understanding how to navigate them is crucial to your success, and hopefully these tips will provide you some insight in how to do so. Next, JT is going to talk to you about how to navigate the committee sessions.
Alright guys, now it's time for your committee session, where the votes are actually happening. I'm JT and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks through how to navigate this session.
Okay. Here are some of the most important things to remember when you're in formal session. 1. Don't be late. If you arrive late at a formal committee session, you will not be allowed to vote. Another delegation can recognize you after the quorum, but you will only be allowed to speak, not to vote. 2. Know your procedures. If you know when it is appropriate to stand, to address the chair, to speak, and to make motions, you'll have a much easier time getting your voice heard effectively. These tips are the essentials if you're to be able at all to function effectively in the formal committee session. But that's the obvious stuff. Here are some of the tips and tricks that'll help you get by in the formal committee session. Now it's time for your formal committee. Here at the table you'll see each of the seats for each delegate arranged in a horseshoe pattern with a row of chairs at the table and behind the table. At the arc of the horseshoe, you'll see the chair, the vice chair, and the rapporteur. Find your country's placard. Know when not to speak. Formal sessions can't go on forever, and there are a lot of resolutions to discuss. Don't speak just to be argumentative. Your fellow delegates and chair will be less inclined to cooperate with you if you do so. 2. Mix content with confidence. How you speak is generally as important as what you're speaking about. Always talk in proper diplomatic speech and, when possible, try to engage every delegate when speaking. Many of the delegates will be timid and will be likely to follow somebody who not only knows what they're doing, but is also able to project this know-how in a clear, concise, and thoughtful way. 3. Pass notes. Even if you've decided on how to vote, collaborate with potential allies. Let them know that you value their opinions, and they'll be much more likely to value yours. Remember, most of the speeches and clarification questions will be addressed during the caucuses and not the formal session. Well, it's important to note that you cannot pass notes during voting procedure. Never waste your time. When you're an alternate delegate, use this time to communicate with your teammate and as well as other delegates. This is also a good position to work on or perfect your questions or speeches. So if you have something that absolutely needs to be done fixed, switch to the alternate position when possible. If you've done your caucusing right, the formal committee should more or less be a rubber stamp and not where necessarily all of the action happens. So if you do everything right and make the most of your time in caucus sessions, this really isn't the most important facet of what you're trying to do here at the model. I hope this information's been helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so now Deborah's going to give you a little background information on one of the more unique aspects of the model. It's called the crisis scenario.
The crisis scenario.
Alright guys, Secretary General here with a crisis scenario hot off the griddle. So, this year's crisis scenario is election crisis in El Salvador. At approximately 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, March 26, 2014, the armed forces of El Salvador, under the command of Brigadier General Francisco Eugenio del Cid, Army Commander, announced that Defense Minister General David Minguia Paez had been arrested and that the government of President Mauricio Funes had been suspended pending a review of election results that are in dispute. There were reports of gunfire in the area of military headquarters in San Salvador. Independent journalists report that in La Union, in the east of the country, local military garrisons were supporting President Funes. There are fears of escalating violence. The armed forces formally announced that in view of the potential fraud and imminent danger to the state, the patriotic armed forces of El Salvador have ensured that public order will be maintained and a fair outcome of recent elections will be guaranteed. In Washington, Ambassador Pedro Vergés of the Dominican Republic, chair of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, convened a meeting of the Permanent Council for 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. OAS Secretary General Jose Miguel Insulza announced that there would be a briefing at the time, and in the meantime called on all parties to cease military action and respect democratic traditions.
I will entertain a motion for an unmoderated caucus in order to discuss the crisis scenario. Delegation of Honduras.
The delegation of the Honduras would like to motion for an unmoderated caucus of 10 minutes to discuss the crisis scenario.
That is in order at this time.
Now, this may seem like a scary situation to jump into, but what you want to do first is go to the biggest group with the country that is directly involved in the scenario. In this case, it is El Salvador. For the first time at the model, the General Committee decided to consult and include the first and second committee in the decision-making process of the crisis scenario. Just because you are not a part of the General Committee, you should always be prepared to get involved and provide recommendations. Biggest tip, get involved. There will always be a delegate or delegates that voice their opinion and suggestions the loudest. Your country may not agree with their opinions, and as a delegate with valid concerns, you should pull aside other delegates. In doing so, you can build up relations in a small group that may agree with you. Having this small group that shares your position and concerns brings together greater advantages for other delegates to listen. Next, here are the ideas that are being put out. Depending on your country's position on certain issues, regional blocs, etc., as delegate, you want to voice your opinions and concerns clearly.